In this video, I'll be showing you how to make this rolling 8-ball animation with text reveal, all in Adobe Animate. Set the stage to a billiards green. Choose the oval tool, set the fill to black, and turn off the stroke. Make sure you're in object drawing mode so that the different shapes we draw don't interact with each other. Hold down Shift as we draw our oval out so it constrains to a perfect circle. Switch that fill over to white, and draw the spot that goes on top. Select the Free Transform tool or press Q on your keyboard and move, scale, and rotate that spot in a position that makes sense. Select the Text tool, change the fill to black, and choose an appropriate font. And add the number 8. That text should probably be bold, so I'll change that over in the Properties panel. Again, with the Free Transform tool, Q on your keyboard, scale and rotate our 8. And to really obsess about the placement, we can hold down Control or Command and Space and zoom in nice and tight and make sure it is pixel perfect. The final thing we're going to do to our 8 is give it a bit of distortion to give the effect that it's on a sphere. Now we can do this with the Free Transform tool, but not to text. We need to convert our text into an object. Right-click on the 8 and choose Break Apart. This changes the text into a shape, and in Adobe Animate, all shapes appear underneath drawing objects, as you can see here. So we actually want to break it apart and then immediately convert it into a drawing object. So if I press Ctrl Z a few times, right-click on the 8, choose Break Apart, and then in the Properties panel, choose Create Object. So now that my 8 is an object, I can use the Free Transform to distort it by holding down Control or Command and dragging out from these control points. And just by fiddling around with this, I can give it the impression that it's wrapping around the sphere. I'll rename this layer 8-ball and then create a new layer to add some reflections to the ball to give it a bit more realism. Create a new layer on top of the 8-ball and call it Reflections. Our reflections are going to start off as white rectangles. So again, making sure we're in object drawing mode, just draw out a rectangle. Zoom in a bit and choose the Selection tool. Deselect the shape by clicking off it, and then we can start to move our corners into place. And likewise, we can bend out the sides to sort of make this reflection shape, as if we might get if a light was shining onto the surface of a sphere. I'll use the same technique for the reflection on the left-hand side, but this time I'll make it a triangle just by dragging over a corner on top of the other, and then following the same process of moving the corners and bending out the sides. To make these reflections more convincing, we're going to add a gradient. Select one of the shapes and go over to the Color panel. Choose Linear Gradient. Set your gradient to go from white to white and set the alpha of one side down to 0. Select the other reflection and apply that same gradient. To tweak the direction and strength of the gradient, go over to the toolbar, and underneath the Free Transform tool, or F on your keyboard, is the Gradient Transform tool. And with this we can rotate the gradient and change its overall position. Do this to both gradients until we have the light falling off from the edge of the ball into the center. Now if I select the reflections layer, can see that only the right reflection is being selected. And that means I've accidentally drawn my left reflection on the 8-ball layer. Probably should have locked that off before drawing. So I need to put them both on the same layer, so Control X to cut, then select my reflections layer and press Control or Command Shift V to paste in place, which means to paste it in exactly the same location in which it was cut from. For the final touch on the reflections, I'm going to select the reflections layer, scroll down in the frame properties and add a blur. Something small like 2 pixels will do here. For the final drawing step, I'm just going to make a shadow on its own layer. So create a new layer, drag it to the bottom and name it appropriately. And then with the oval tool, just draw out an oval. By default, it's got that previous gradient, so I need to select that and change its fill to black. And then I'll lower the opacity and select the layer and give that a bit of a blur as well. With the drawing done, let's turn our attention to the animation. We'll achieve this with a nested tween. The inner tween will be just the ball rotating, while the outer tween will be the ball, the reflections, and the shadow moving from right to left. Click on the 8-ball layer, which will select all the drawing objects in that layer, and press F8 on your keyboard. This will create a new symbol, which I'm going to call 8-ball static. If we move over to the library, we can see it is there without the reflections in the shadow. And now what we're going to do is tween this to rotate once. So head over to 2 seconds in the timeline and press F6 on your keyboard to create a keyframe at this point. Right-click on the space between and choose Create Classic Tween. What this does is move the ball from its original location to its final location, which is the same. So we won't see any change, but if I select one of the frames in the tween and go over to the tweening properties, I can change the rotation to counterclockwise once. And so now the ball will rotate in place. Of course, after frame 1, I don't have any reflections or shadows, so go to the 2-second point on each of those layers and press F5 to add frames to those points. To get a sense of timing, press Enter on your keyboard to preview the animation. We'll now combine all of our layers into one symbol, so select them all, and right-click and choose Convert Layers to Symbol. Call it 8-ball rotating. Press OK, and our new symbol is placed on a single layer in the main scene with that same 2-second duration. Give yourself a bit of space by panning the stage over to the left by holding down space and dragging. Then move the ball off the stage on the right-hand side. Select the frame at the 2-second mark and press F6 to add a new keyframe. Move the ball onto the stage, holding down Shift to constrain its movement horizontally. Select the frame in between and right-click and choose Create Classic Tween. Playing this through by previewing with Enter, we can see that the ball is now rolling onto stage. If I hit this button to clip the contents onto the stage, then I can see the ball only appearing on stage. Now I feel like the ball is a bit too low, so I'm going to move it up, but I'm going to have to change 2 keyframes. So if I choose the first one and drag it up, and I'm just going to set the position by changing the position and size value, and that way I'll know that I'm moving the ball to exactly the same location, and so it will roll perfectly horizontally. The next improvement we can make is changing the easing of this tween. By default, all tweens run at a constant rate, so this ball runs at the same speed and abruptly comes to a stop. It would be better if we could ease it out, which means it will be slightly faster on the way in and it will slow down gradually as it reaches the end. So to do that, select any of the frames in the tween, and over in the properties, go to the classic ease, and here we see a graph of our easing. Choose the ease out option, and here you can see that there's a few presets that all have varying strengths. We'll choose quad to start with and see how that looks. Now for me, I think that's just a bit too quick. So we can customize our ease by clicking on the edit button and adjusting these points on the curve. So I still need the curve to flatten out at the end so that the ball looks like it's coming to a stop. And I can preview from this window. We could give this a custom name if we like, but I'll just leave it as My Ease 1 and hit save and apply. One thing you might notice now after applying that custom ease is that the ball itself seems to skid at the end of its motion. And that's because the rotation of the ball is still set with the classic ease. So we need to double click inside the symbol. You can see up the top now I'm inside the symbol, and go to my ease and change that from the classic ease to the custom ease we just created. So double click to set that, go back to the scene, and now when we preview it, it matches up nicely. The last part of this tutorial is getting the ball to reveal the text as it rolls on. So the first step is to create a new layer and add some text to it. To create the text reveal, we're going to shape tween a rectangle in sync with our ball. Create a new layer and call it Revealer. And let's draw a rectangle on that layer. We're aiming for it to match up with the ball. I'll start by making it a red color, just so I can see it. And I want to go from outside the stage to where the ball starts to where the ball finishes. Use the free transform tool to resize it accordingly, moving that pivot point so that I can get it pretty much spot on. Select the frame at the 2-second mark and press F6 to convert that into a keyframe, and then with the free transform tool, moving that pivot point over to the left, and resize that rectangle right down until it's barely visible. Right-click any of the frames in between and choose Create Shape Tween. Scrubbing the playhead, we can see that our rectangle resizes down now. However, it lags behind the ball, and that's because the easing is set to that classic ease. So select one of the frames in between and go to our properties and change it from our classic ease to our custom ease that we created earlier. And now our rectangle follows the ball, and our last step is to change the color of that rectangle. We need to change the color on frame 1 to the same as the stage color, and at the 2-second mark, select the shape, change the fill to that, and with our rectangle the same as the stage color, we get the effect that the ball is revealing the text as we go through. So that's it for this one. You can download the Animate file in the description. I'd love to see what you come up with using these techniques. Let me know in the comments. Until next time.